Hi guys and girls, Emma again. Welcome back to another video in this Patreon series on this Stuart 400 3/4 size replica. Castings to come. First thing really is this crank, a bell crank. It's a funny little setup, and there's a few options and quite a lot of variations in the way it could be made. Looking at the book here, it shows a couple of options. One is a taper and a key and a nut. I don't like this much because we're running out of space on the inside anyway, being a 3/4 size model. And the other one is a push fit or a press fit and a probably quite a lot of Loctite and a Scotch key and a peened over end, which I like a lot more. So that's probably what I'm going to do, is just bore him out straight. Looking at these, there's not much in between them. There's two Clark Cent. This one's probably the nicer casting, except it's got a bit of a gap in here. That's easily fixed. This one, it needs a bit more off it all over to tidy it up. And might have some sand inclusions or something in there, I'm not sure. So I think we're going to go with this one. I've given this a bit of a rub on the linisher here and here, really, and here, just to set it up and give us some flat sides. What we want to do is set it up on the faceplate, I think, so that we can bore this. Probably the first option, or the first thing to do, is to mark the centre of this disc. So I'll get a pair of dividers and do that, I think. When we've got that marked, I might centre punch it. And that'll give us a reference for setting that up. It's a pretty nice little casting, really. Everything's reasonably flat and tidy. The book says, or it shows a method of doing this that's probably as good as anything. We could set it up a dozen ways, really, if we had a adjustable plier parallel, inside out on the faceplate. Now I've got a little faceplate that John Creasy made me out of a dive weight, which is a really nice thing for him to do. And I've gone to the trouble of finding a block of wood the right thickness. I'm pretty close to the right thickness there, so that'll sit. The balance weight will sit nicely on there and give us a parallel under there. There's a bit of brass shim there, which will give us a fairly close, I think, fairly close sort of a fit as far as sitting nicely front and back. I've got a bit of emery paint cloth under there and that bit of brass shim. And I've got some 10mm T-nuts that fit nicely in the slots in the faceplate. So I think if we were to bolt that down there like that and check it front and back with the indicator, and probably we could do that nicely on the bench or on the surface plate or on the mill table or anything else. If we set up an indicator and check that there and there, so that this is level this way, it's got to be pretty level that way because it's a piece of plywood and it's fairly uniform. And if we got it right this way, just by shimming it nicely, we could probably set it up on centre there and bore it and face it and call this operation done. We don't need to machine this around here, so these are quite okay here. This will be done when it's finally on the crank. And all we really need is a good setup surface on here to set this crank pin on when we set it over the other way to on centre to machine this. And we probably need this reasonably tight. I don't like this one much in here. We should be able to face this and bore it to approximately 420, something like that, 437. and make the other piece to fit nicely. So that looks like a good setup. I'm going to So I've set this up pretty close here with a couple of tie down bolts, and I've got a block of plywood that I've actually screwed to the back here, and I've used two 10mm T-nuts here in the webs to hold all that together. There's a piece of shim there which gets us pretty close to even here, and I've just used a scribe block the old-fashioned way, just for the fun of it, because it's a 1920s design, and got that. So that's just scratching there, and it's just scratching there. So that should be pretty even, I think, all the way across. Next job is to set this up, and then I'll put this on the lathe and set this up with a centre and an indicator and get it spinning concentric this way. So we'll go across the lathe now and we'll do that. So over here at the lathe, and I'll put the faceplate on the machine. This has got a fair bit of wobble in it, so it's going to need a good tap that way. So in the end, I've just set this up to a scribe block on the outside of that circle. It's a casting, and that's running pretty jolly sweet there, and that's probably where it needs to be. So if we tighten that down now, we'll be able to drill that and get some sort of results. I'm going to drill it, and I'm probably going to see what sort of a reamer I've got and ream it out. It doesn't matter very much what it is, as long as the other piece is identical. So let's tighten this down. And with any luck on that bit of wood, it shouldn't move very much, I think. So we've got some joy there, really. Nice slow speed, and that's not going to move. So there we go, we machined right through to 10.5. Now 421's 10.7 or something. So I'm going to go a little bit bigger, and it's not a real good finish there, so I'm going to set up a solid rock boring bar. And we can use that to face that boss as well, I think. So I've got that board just pretty close to what I think it needs to be. Struggling a bit to get a good finish in there. Probably it could be hard cast iron, but I think it's just the setup and a few other things. I think we can get a pretty reasonable dry fit in there and make that work. I've machined that down, and it only took about 5 thou to clean that up, not even. Very, very little to clean that up on there, so I'm really pleased with that, and it's nice and concentric. The bore in the centre I think we'll probably live with, and that might hold a bit of Loctite anyway. So next job is to take this off and to set it up the other way around. So that's a back on the bench job. Let's go and have a look at this. So if we have a look at this, this has got to be offset 1.1 The drawing says 1.5 and we're only going 3/4 size, so 1.1 from the centre of this. I had a bit of a look and found a 27 64th drill, which is a really good fit in that hole. Now I've marked this by taking half this dimension off the 1/8 and just scribing a line. It's not particularly good for your calipers, but in this pinch on cast iron it'll work. And I marked the centre. Then I've drilled it using that block of wood we used as a stop. I've drilled it here 1/8 on the right spot. So all we need now to set this up is a pin that fits over the right distance from the edge there so it doesn't rock, and we can put a couple of clamps on there, and that'll be a very easy machining job. So probably we could just about get away with a bolt through the crank hole if we got this exactly right on the middle so it didn't rock. And that would be really nice. So if we put this faceplate back on and put a collet in this headstock with a piece of anything really in it, a piece of metal, and machine that to fit on that spigot so that there's no rock in it, that should be exactly on the right centre, and we should be able to just machine this down. That's the theory. We might need to put a bit of a balance offset crank on this side, so a bolt in this side, T-nut and a 6mm bolt and a decent little counterweight there won't hurt, so you might make it find a washer to go on there as well. But let's set this up and we'll machine the spigot and we'll have a look at it and put this bolt on, and we might machine this while we're at it. So my camera went flat last night and I had a bit of a mess around. This lathe, we're lucky enough to be able to put the collet in the in the spindle as well as the faceplate or a chuck on. So I've just made a plug in there with a bore in it, and that fits nicely in that little hole that's marked 1/8 from the centre here. So if we put that on there, that's got to be lined up and the spacing's correct there so that it sits nice and firm, and we can put a bolt in it. Without too much messing around. And a counterbalance on the other side, and we're sort of done. This is a piece of old cast iron bar I had sitting around. It's a bit sacrificial, so we can cut this out here if we need to clear the tool. But we've got this here. Now, that's all very well, but we've got a problem because this isn't going to clean up at the right centre. There's not enough metal on this side, and it's a pattern making problem. Two things I could do, and the other crank seems pretty hard. This is hard anyway, but the other crank seam is pretty hard, and I've just dropped it in the oven for a while to see if we can cool it down and chill it or get rid of some of the chill problems. That's not all that certain to happen, so what I'm going to do is, while we're in it, I'm going to turn this down till it cleans up, which is going to be probably 80th thou underside, something like that. I'm going to make like a steel bushing to shrink on there, which I think will be all right. And that'll give us a hard surface to work on, and we can polish and stuff as well. So that's what I'm going to do with this, and I think that's probably going to be okay. But that's a pattern making problem. This casting is still fairly hard, but it's much better than the other one. Because these are so thin, the metal cools so quickly, and you end up with chill problems in the casting. It's a bit of an issue, but with small cast iron castings like this, until you get on top of it, it's a bit of a problem. and there's no real, it might just be a skin, but if the skin's 1/16 of an inch thick, there's nothing left in the middle. So let's machine this down till it's about right, or until it cleans up, and we'll have a look at it and see how much needs to be done. So in the end, I've machined this down to, I think it's 427.8 thou, 400 or 0.4287, something like that. And I made a little 4140 bush that'll go on there nicely, I think. It's a fraction tight, probably 3/4 of a thou, something like that, half a thou. It looks like it'll nearly go on. It's a bit tight that way. I think that'll be a good shrink fit. Now, I'm going to clean this up so there's nothing inside it. So that shrunk on there pretty good, and I haven't managed to bend it or anything, which I'm really pleased about. I had to actually press it on the last little bit. Probably wasn't quite hot enough in the bush, but I didn't want to wreck the temper on it either. That's polished up nice and it's right on size. I'm really pleased with that. And I've given this a bit of a sand up around here. When we get the crank in and set it between centres, we'll machine this surface and this surface down to size, nice and neat. But I think this will do here, just sand it up on the linisher. So the only thing really to do with this is put a washer on it and a crank and a cross pin. I'm not going to do that just now. We might wait until, well, for a little while. It might be in the next video or it might not. There's not going to be a lot of continuity on any of these videos. It's just as we get the bits. So this, I think, is just about done. Let's have a look at it on the bench. So there we go. Fairly pleased with that. It's nice and parallel. The crank is a push or a press fit in there, and the gear sits up against here. That's in the recess under the crankcase, or in the side of the crankcase. And then this is machined to go through the bush on the other side. So probably what I'm going to do is make a blank, machine down to fit in there, and with the gear profile on it, and cut the gear and machine this down nearly to size, and leave a centre punch hole in the end here, or a centre drill hole in the end here, and then we can machine this between centres and this between centres and get everything running nice and smooth and true. That's the theory. I don't want to machine this last piece until we get the bushing done in the main body, because it needs to fit pretty exactly. This goes here like this, and this bush here, which the steel just runs on the cast iron, which is a pretty good bearing, and a lot of things were made like that years ago. I'm probably going to put a bit of DevCon in this or something maybe and clean this up. I might just leave it, but we'll clean this up first and see how we go. So I'm going to call that done for today. That's a good start made. And that's how it fits. Pretty happy with that. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all your support. If you're watching this on Patreon, if you're watching it on YouTube, well, don't forget to like and subscribe, all that sort of stuff. Check out my Patreon, because there'll be another project. By the time this gets to YouTube, probably this will be just about finished, or it will be finished, and we'll have started another project. So check out my Patreon to get a bit further advanced, a little bit further along with the series. And be kind to each other.